Will the streak continue with at least one UDFA making the 2025 roster? We would bet on it.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby. It's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm cash.
Welcome in another episode of Sounds Gouda. Thank you everybody for coming back and taking a listen to us. Of course, and as always, I'm one of your two co-hosts. My name is Rob Ralph. Next to me is my best friend, as always, Jordan Olson. If you are on YouTube and you are listening there, please try and help us. We're getting pretty close to 500 subscribers, but we're going to be trying for a new goal to try to get 600 subscribers. If you're listening or you have been listening for a while, make sure to give us a like, sub, and turn on those notifications as well. So we're always excited to be talking Packers football with you. Just know that we do have new content every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast as well. So on today's episode, obviously, as we alluded to in the intro, we are talking about our UDFA class, so digging even deeper onto all the details and minutiae of the Green Bay Packers. But if you did not know, the Green Bay Packers have had at least one undrafted free agent on their season opening roster for 19 consecutive years. And as we said in the beginning, you best know that we are counting on that to be year 20 this year. As we'll get into some of these prospects, there's a lot of good things that more than a few of these can offer for us. So, Jordan, tell us a little bit here too. I'll flip it over here to you about our UDFA's, and maybe we can start getting into this.
Yeah. No, I think the Packers do an excellent job overall of signing UDFA players that they feel like can come in and contribute. And I think that's why you see, sometimes we don't always hit on like every premier UDFA name out there, because there are some teams that will go out and pay some of these UDFAs like $300,000 guarantees. And, up to this point, I only see one player that I know has been given guaranteed money, and we'll talk about him in a minute, but it's nowhere $300,000. So the Packers lose out on a couple of those big guys due to that, but they do get a lot of players to come and compete on this roster, knowing that one or two guys every year actually have a chance to compete. And as much as Goody loves his draft picks, he knows the importance of constantly turning over this roster and giving, guys a chance to develop who may have been overlooked in the pre-draft process. So we'll jump in. This isn't probably going to be our longest episode. And, if you've heard some of the other UDFA breakdowns, maybe this information isn't new to you, but, there's not a lot out there. So we did our best in trying to make this informative. We'll have a little bit of discussion at the end about who we feel like is the best player to stay on this roster or players. So stick around with us for a few minutes. First guy on this list is Jonathan Baldwin, and he is the player that I know the Packers have given some guaranteed money to at this point in time. He was given a $115,000 guarantee, which is a pretty good year at the office. Rob and I were just saying, man, it would be nice for us to make $115,000 in a year. Maybe someday we will, but that's not what I'm doing right now. But for him to go get a chance to make this roster, get a nice payday, that's a great place for a guy like Jonathan Baldwin to be in. He is a safety from UNLV. He's 5'11", 190 pounds, ran a 4.540, and has a pretty poor RAS score. You'll notice that there's a few of those guys in here, but besides the money, there's not really anything at stake. So his RAS score was a 4.83. A little bit about his stats coming out of UNLV. He had 3 interceptions and 12 passes defensed in 2023 and 2024. And then he mostly played 2022 and 2023. In 2024, he mostly played in the slot, and he recorded 3 more interceptions and 14 passes defended. So kind of when he, I think, moved from safety to kind of that overhang defender, kind of like Javon Bullard in the role that we see him in, he had high productivity last year. He also had 3.5 sacks and 9 tackles for loss. which earned him second team All Mountain West. So, what I see here is a poor man's Javon Bullard, somebody who probably makes the practice squad. And later on this week, we're going to release an episode where we break down the 53-man roster predictions, and we'll discuss how a guy like Jonathan Baldwin either fits into the back end of the roster or, is a solid practice squad developmental addition for us. But they definitely see something there in him with giving him some money. And we will see what the future of Jonathan Baldwin looks like.
Yeah, so next up, running back Amar Johnson out of South Dakota State.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about him: 5'9", 205 pounds, ran a 4.3940. Has a pretty good RAS score at 8.80. A little bit more about him and his career. He did rush for 136 yards, which is a 6.4 average, and 14 touchdowns, and added 30 receptions for 233 yards, 7.8 average. It's pretty good to earn some FCS All-American honors. He did average an impressive 3.80 yards after contact. So we will have to see if he does, if he's able to make it. I would say that it's a pretty crowded room, so I don't know if he'll pull another UDFA type of make on the roster in Emmanuel Wilson, who you all obviously recognize, but possibility. I'd be a little bit shocked if that was the case, but otherwise, there's a lot of good things to like about Amar Johnson at South Dakota State.
Yeah, another jackrabbit, right? We have a great one on the roster right now, and Tucker Kraft, and he's a little bit on the shorter side, but he is dense and he does run a fast 40 time. So I'll be interested to see what he can put on tape. But the early path for Amar Johnson is not strong outside of being a practice squad player at this point in time. So Jaylen Johnson, dropped to Dumas. So I don't know. He must have decided as he wants to become a professional that he just wants to simplify things and be Jaylen Johnson, or I don't know. People have all kinds of different reasons besides name changes. So if all of a sudden you're going to wonder who this Jaylen Johnson is, because I haven't heard that before, he's formerly Jaylen Dumas-Johnson. And he's a linebacker from Kentucky. This guy is a guy that we really like. We liked him throughout the entirety of the pre-draft process. For a lot of reasons. He's 6'3", he's 6'1", and 3/4. So he's 238 pounds. He has 32-inch arms, which is average for a guy that his size and length. But runs a pretty decent 40 for an off-ball linebacker, and has a 8.99 RAS. So getting a guy who's nearly a 90th percentile athlete. He's got a very interesting story. One, he formerly played 3 years at Georgia. So, he's, for all intents and purposes, he's a Georgia Bulldog. He was, developed by Georgia and then transferred to Kentucky. So he is a national champion. He played on one of those national championship Georgia teams. And he missed a few games at the end of his Georgia career due to injury. In 2024, his 4-year totals, he had 13 sacks, 24 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 8 passes defensed. So you can see in that, career stat line that he does have some playmaking ability. And he kind of the cherry on top is he had a fumble recovery that he returned for a touchdown against the Texas Longhorns. So really high on him. And, the highest place I've seen him ranked he was ranked 216th on ESPN's big board. So safely a 6th-round selection.
So next up, defensive lineman Nazir Stackhouse out of Georgia. Some more Georgia players. Goody definitely likes his Georgia Bulldogs, there's no doubt. A lot of people were pretty excited about this. He did have a consensus of the 202nd best prospect on ESPN. But what's to say about him? I believe out of anybody that we've drafted or gotten, he's your true 0 or 1 tech nose tackle. for the Green Bay Packers or a TJ Slayton replacement. 6'3". He does have the measurables to back that up too. 6'3", 327 pounds, 5.15 40, and 32.5-inch arms with a 6.06 score. So what's to say about say about Stackhouse? He does have 27 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss as a fifth-year senior. In 50 career games, he had 3 sacks and 9 tackles for losses. 2 of the sacks came in 2023. He was second team all SEC. But, according to Dane Brugler, he was a better prospect even than the one we drafted in Warren Brinson. So both those two were on the defensive line together, playing right next to each other. A little bit interchangeably, but Stackhouse, I would say, probably more as the zero tech from what you'd probably see on film, or the nose tackle. He is an excellent run defender, like excellent. Can take on double teams too as well, which really helps. So we'll get into this a little bit too, but he won't wow you with his pass rush. He only had 3 career sacks, but he was absolutely a stone wall there in the middle to be able to help Georgia's elite run defense there consistently. So there is a lot to love about Stackhouse. Him and Jaylen Johnson, were probably the 2 ones that were the most Packers fans are probably most excited for. I think he has a real chance to be able to make this roster as a practice squad for sure, but maybe even chance on the real roster as your nose tackle for this defense.
Yeah. Getting into the offensive line right now. So JJ Lippy, I have no idea if that's how that's actually pronounced, but that's what I'm going to go with right now from Northern Illinois. So a MAC prospect. I've definitely crossed paths with JJ Lippy. However, I'm going to, from a fans watching perspective in the stands, being at Western Michigan, I go to almost every home game. So I've definitely watched him play. However, not super in tune with every offensive lineman in the MAC conference. So I can't say that I remember watching him play. But interesting about Lippy, he has Wisconsin connections. So he is a Milwaukee area native out of Whitefish Bay. So, probably a dream come true for him to sign with the Green Bay Packers and get a chance to play with them. I mean, I'd imagine that I would be extremely stoked to be even given that opportunity to, wear the green and gold growing up in Wisconsin. But he's 6'5", 302, has a really slow 40 time, 5.45 40 time. So he's not fast. But he's got 33.5-inch arms. He's, by all NFL standards, an average athlete. He has a 5.67, so that's a 50th, just over 50th percentile athlete for all guys who come into the league. So it's not that he can't play athletically in the league. He's just probably not going to wow you with his athleticism. So a couple of things about Lippy. He only gave up 1 sack and 11 pressures in 2024 to earn all, MAC, first team MAC honors. He played in 52 games in his career and had 47 starts. So he is a pedigreed player. Most of his snaps came at left guard. And then he did play 42 snaps at the other 2 positions. So for all intents and purposes, this is an interior line player. Somebody who's going to come in, get a chance to probably stick around on the practice squad, because as we know, we are going to potentially lose some offensive linemen in free agency next year. And right now he might be lineman 12 on the depth chart, and next year might be competing for a back end spot if he can stick around.
Next up, offensive lineman Tyler Cooper out of Minnesota. Pretty good prospect here. Some of his measurables, 6'6", 310 pounds, with an 8.46 RAS score. He did grow up in St. Croix Falls, northwestern Wisconsin. So he's a Wisconsin boy, which is really nice. But a little bit more about him. Cooper was an honorable mention All Big Ten in 2024 and a 5-time academic All Big Ten. So he's got the smarts as well as the physical gifts, which is pretty good, pretty awesome. He didn't allow any sacks in 2023, but gave up 3 in 2024, including 2 against Michigan. Michigan is quite the powerhouse these days, so no shocker there. They got a lot of good prospects over there. Almost every one of his 1,325 snaps did come at guard. He does seem to be more of a run blocker, excel in his run blocking grade at 77.4 for PFF, and then a little bit less as far as his pass block grade, but 66.3. But that's something that the Packers coaching staff, all the positional coaching guys on the line, would be able to teach him and coach him up. So possibility here for Tyler Cooper out of Minnesota.
Yeah, and PFF had a 6 round grade on him as well. I didn't put it down in my notes, but I think he was something like the 200th best prospect according to PFF. And PFF is pretty good,
Yeah.
especially at identifying their late round guys who might stick in this league. So would not be surprised at all if Tyler Cooper really comes into camp and impresses. Especially with his run block ability. We know the Packers really want to turn into a running team, despite, 30 years of history that say we're a passing team. And Rob and I, you've heard us, we kind of have some feelings that, pass first and dominate in the run after might be the best case scenario. But the Packers have clearly made moves this offseason that show that that's what Matt LaFleur wants to do. He wants to ground and pound. One more offensive lineman here. I'm a little less high on this guy, but we'll see what he does in camp. Pretty big guy, in Brant Banks from Rice. He's 6'7", 218. He's got a ginormous wingspan of nearly 83 inches long, so he has the length. I mean, he should at 6'7", too. But he was a former Nebraska player, who transferred to Rice and then became a multi-year starter there. So he did lead the entire, his team in offensive snaps in his first season at Rice. So somebody who came in from, a premier program. I mean, I guess Nebraska fans would tell you that there's still a premier program, but there's certainly a program that gets a lot of talent, 4 and 5 star prospects and, have the history with their national championships that they have there. But a guy who played Big Ten football and transferred to Rice and really got his opportunity. We'll learn more about Banks, the Brant Banks. We know a lot about Aaron Banks at this point in time, and see if he gets a chance to stick around. I don't know if he'll end up on the practice squad, but I personally would not put a lot of stock in Brant Banks making the 53-man roster at this point in time, given his pedigree and where we're at.
Moving on to the defensive backs. First one up here, Tyron Herring out of Delaware. Some measurables for him: 6'1", 201 pounds. So he does have the length and the weight at the position. 4.49 40 with a 4.27 RES score. So not as good there, but a little bit more about him. Herring was an all Ivy League in 2022 at Dartmouth and an all Colonial in 2023 and 2024. He had 1 interception and 3 passes in 24 and 3 interceptions and 11 passes defensed in 2023. PFF did charge him with a 61.8% catch rate in 2024. I would say that cornerback depth, some would argue that might be one of the Packers' weaker links, right? All considering what happens with Jair Alexander, Jalen King, Kamal Haddon, and then, of course, our 7th round pick in Micah Robinson, too, as well. So I would be a little bit shocked if he made it. But then again, too, in training camp, you never know what's really going to come out. They're going to have some competition here as well. So if he does show out, who knows? He could pull a Tremont Williams maybe. So that's obviously best case scenario, and to put on a high pedestal there. But just a little bit more about this Tyron Herring out of Delaware.
All right, moving on to Bugs Brown. So, this is a guy who's gotten a little bit of heat on the internet. Our guy Eli Berkovitz has posted a little bit of tape on him. He's been a fun player to watch, but I think his first name is Kazir. He's out of Florida Atlantic. He's 6'1", 223, so he is a large, rocked up defensive back who officially ran a 4.3 or 4.53 40 time. He looks like he's faster than that on tape, like he has more speed, but who knows? Maybe he wasn't a great tester at his pro day or combine. Could be just somebody who's got great game speed and doesn't run well. I'd like to say that was always my MO in high school. My 40 time was not as impressive as my tape time. But, maybe that's just my own
Don't
bias.
let anybody fool you. I went to a game with a rival high school that we played at that we hated, and they had a game every year. Can't remember the name of the game. Jordan does probably, but I saw Jordan rip off like a 60-yard run against like a stacked defensive line. They were trying to stop the run. I will never ever forget that. Jordan was a much better player than he gives himself credit for.
Yeah, that was against Central. It was the art game. I mean,
Yes.
I was certainly not like the blue chip prospect on our roster, but it was a counter play. I played H back at the time, and I got to rip one off. I think unfortunately I didn't make it into the end zone on that one. The referee ruled me out as I was diving to the pylon, and
Yeah.
I still think to this day, this was before the cell phone era. I think I was in, but that if
Everybody thought you were in.
I think that think if they would have instant replay, that would have been a touchdown. So I mean, for sure that was one of my highlight plays, but probably would have been the highlight play of my high school running, or my high school career had that been a score at that point in time. So
It
you're
was
not here to listen about my high school escalades or Rob's either, but just a little look into Rob and Jordan's life about 20 years ago at this point in time, if that, doesn't exactly age us to how old we are. So, all right, back to Bugs though. He played 3 seasons at Maine and then transferred to FAU. He was tremendous at Maine, only allowing like a 40.8% catch rate and had 2 interceptions and 10 passes defensed, where he mostly played cornerback. I think Green Bay and some of the things that they've said and now listing them on the roster view him more as a box player, an overhang safety, another kind of guy like Javon Bullard that they can probably move around. We keep hearing this Packers, team talk about versatility. And I think they see him as somebody that can do a lot of things for them. I certainly think that he has a lot of special teams upside, somebody who could be a gunner on, the punt team. We will see what the future of Bugs Brown looks like, but somebody to keep an eye on going into camp.
Moving on a little bit quicker here, but running back Jaylen White out of Georgia Southern. White was an all-conference in each of his final 3 seasons. His 5-season total was 3,016 rushing yards and 36 touchdowns and 60 receptions for 365 yards and 2 touchdowns. So obviously some very good statistics. Closed his career with 744 rushing yards on a 4.6 average and 13 touchdowns with a 3.19 yards after contact. And a little bit about his measurables. Another 6 foot, 205, kind of good and stout, 4.6040, and with a 7.73 RAS score. So that's a little bit more about Jaylen White.
This is probably one of the last, and well, I guess there's a couple more guys on here, but there's a lot of upside intrigue with this next guy, Julian Fleming from Penn State. So he's not going to wow you with his testing. His measurables are great. Ran a really bad 40-yard dash time, 4.68 seconds in this year's 40. Had an okay vertical, but definitely not great for a guy that should be of his size, but only had a 34.5-inch vertical. So a guy who did not test well. So very interesting, though, for a guy who did not test well at the combine or at his pro day. I don't think he was a combine invite, actually, but he was a former 5-star recruit from Ohio State. Played 4 years there and transferred to Penn State. He never really caught on. Obviously, we know the just gauntlet of receivers at Ohio State. So I guess it's easy to be washed out as a 5-star prospect if you're playing with the likes of, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Mbuke and, the list goes on and on. But he did transfer to Penn State and he had a little bit more production there. For his career, he had 93 catches for 1,139 yards and 8 touchdowns in his 5 seasons. This is where it gets interesting, though. He is a mauler in the run blocking game. He's very unselfish. There's a bunch of that on tape. His leadership intangibles have been pretty highly talked about by a number of his teammates and former coaches. I guess the upside intrigue here is that, maybe a practice squad guy that takes Malik Heath's spot eventually as that big-bodied run blocking wide receiver after a year of development. So
Yeah, definitely like what I've seen on tape from him. Next up, quarterback Taylor Elgersma. Elgersma. Uh,
That's how I think it says, yeah,
okay.
or it's pronounced.
Camp invite, really good measurables. 6'5", 227 pounds. Became the first Canadian quarterback to receive an invite to the Senior Bowl. Won the Heck Crichton Trophy, which goes to the most outstanding Canadian football player. In his senior season at Wilfrid Layer, Elgersma completed 73.5% of his passes for 4,011 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He also showcased his mobility, tallying in 223 yards on the ground and 6 scores on 40 carries. I think he has quite the uphill battle, but you never know with training camp. I think the best case for him would be to squeak in on the practice squad and compete with your likes of Sean Clifford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will see. And then, this is another camp invite that we kind of touched on a little bit. But I mean, I can't not, he's a UW-La Crosse player, but the more and more I look into Jack Stutter from UW-La Crosse, aka the Alien, and I was doing some research and he's nicknamed the Alien. I'm guessing that's the case because especially against his peer group, he's probably a freak athlete, but he's 6'2", 205, from UW-La Crosse. He ended up leaving UW-La Crosse as the team's all-time leader in touchdown receptions with 35, leader in receiving yards with 3,127 yards, and his second career all-time in receptions with 182. So he'd be a very interesting story if he made the Packers, because I think a lot of Packers fans remember Bill Schroeder. I certainly do. He had a number of scores and big plays for our 90s Packers, and he was a UWL alum. So it'd be a very cool story to see him stick around. I think the odds are very against Jack Stutter at this point in time to make the roster, but a fun story nevertheless. One more interesting point on him is he was one of two semifinalists for the 2024 Gagliardi Trophy, which is presented to the most outstanding football player in Division III. So essentially the Division III Heisman. He was one of two finalists for that award. So the guy can ball at the level that he plays. So we'll make this quick and then we'll get you on to your day. But Rob, if you had to pick one player to put your money on to keep the UDFA streak alive this year, and I think the odds are good, who are you picking?
Oh no, it's okay. So one player and they have to make it. So then I'm going to take my increased odds betting here at either Dumas-Johnson, sorry, Jaylen Johnson, or Nazir Stackhouse. I'm probably going to go Nazir Stackhouse. He'd be the betting odds, I would think, a favorite probably. TJ Slayton replacement, projected to be better than Warren Brinson. Plays really well, tackles really well, played at Georgia, is your true really zero tech or your nose tackle, has the size to do it, has the ability on tape for what he can do, to be able to do it, tackles well, holds up against double teams. I'll be a little bit shocked if he doesn't compete and make that team. So for me, it's Stackhouse.
Yeah, I mean, not to be unoriginal, but I agree with you that, it's Stackhouse just because of the role that he can fill on this roster that really nobody else can. My dark horse pick though that you didn't mention, because I like Jaylen Johnson, but Tyler Cooper, I really do think that, especially with where the Packers want to go in the run game, his proven ability already as a couple year starter at guard, in the zone and the gap blocking schemes. He's shown that he is a willing and capable blocker. And I think there's an outside chance that if they want to keep 10 offensive linemen on this year's roster, and again, we'll tease next episode, we're going to do a 53-man way too early roster prediction, but he could be a guy that could be that 10th offensive lineman if they want to go in that direction. So look out for Tyler Cooper this offseason through camp, and let's see what he can bring to the table. All right, more great content from Sounds Good every Wednesday and Saturday. We're going to continue that through this off season. We really appreciate you being here and listening. So please share this with your family, your friends, and other Packers fans. We'll always try to get back to your comments. Again, Rob here is excellent at interacting with everybody who communicates with us on YouTube. and we really appreciate that. So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts too, please make sure to follow us. It really helps the show. You can connect with us at X. Rob's at Sounds Gouda, and I'm at Olson Jord. You can see that in the banner below if you got questions on the spelling. But until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack, go.
Pack.
Been wanted this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better.